Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of redemption and unexpected love, where life's harshest fall becomes the catalyst for its greatest ascent. Enjoy the story.
Blake Worthington III stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, his eyes distant as they gazed upon the glittering Los Angeles skyline. At 27, he should have been in the prime of his life, yet he felt like a prisoner in his own body, trapped in a wheelchair that reminded him of everything he had lost. The sound of the apartment door opening barely registered. Blake knew it would be his father, Robert, coming to check on him, as he did every day. "Blake," Robert's voice called out across the spacious living room. "It's a beautiful day outside. Why don't you go out for a bit, get some fresh air?" Blake clenched his jaw. He didn't bother to turn around. His voice, dripping with sarcasm, replied, "Oh, sure, Dad. Let me just hop up and go for a jog, shall I?" He heard his father sigh, the familiar sound of frustration filling the room. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. The garden is lovely this time of year. I could what?" Blake interrupted, spinning his wheelchair to face his father. "Wheel around like some kind of spectacle for the neighbors to gawk at? No thanks." Robert's face fell, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Blake, please, this isn't healthy. I can't just what, Dad?" Blake's voice rose, his anger bubbling to the surface. "Can't just walk? Can't just be normal?" "Yeah, I think we've made that pretty clear." For a moment, father and son stood in tense silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Robert shook his head. "I'll come back later. Try to eat something, okay?" As the door closed behind his father, Blake let out a frustrated growl, slamming his fist against the armrest of his wheelchair. The pain that shot through his hand was a welcome distraction from the constant ache in his legs. He wheeled himself back to the window, catching his reflection, a ghost of the man he used to be. Gone were the days of confidence and ease. Now all he saw was a broken shell of himself, dressed in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, his hair messy and unkempt. Memories of that fateful night flooded his mind, the night that changed everything. 6 months earlier, Blake had been the life of the party, holding court in the VIP section of the hottest club in LA, surrounded by friends. That night, drunk and overconfident, Blake made a terrible decision. He had harassed a waitress, a young woman with long chestnut hair and a quiet beauty that had caught his eye. She had refused his advances, and in his intoxicated state, Blake had caused a scene. In the chaos that followed, a large mirror had come crashing down, leaving Blake lying on the floor with a severe injury to his spine. Since that night, his life had unraveled. The confident, carefree man he used to be had vanished. Now every morning was the same: pain, frustration, and the harsh reminder that his legs no longer worked. The doctors had told him there was hope with physical therapy, but Blake had given up on hope long ago. Still, part of him wanted to prove to himself that he wasn't completely helpless. Determined, Blake tried to stand. For a brief moment, he felt a flicker of triumph as he rose to his feet, only to collapse to the floor. The physical pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the emotional weight of his failure. Lying on the floor, Blake pounded his fists in frustration. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he mourned the life he had lost and the man he used to be. His so-called friends had disappeared, and the endless stream of admirers had dried up. Even his father looked at him with pity rather than pride. As the tears subsided, a dark thought crept into Blake's mind. What was the point of going on like this? Maybe it would be better for everyone if he wasn't around anymore. The thought brought an odd sense of calm. For the first time in months, Blake felt like he had control over something. Determined, Blake wheeled himself out of the apartment and made his way toward the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, a place he had often visited in the past. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in warm hues. As he approached the edge, Blake felt a strange peace wash over him. But just as he was about to make his final decision, he noticed movement in the tall grass nearby. It was a dog, standing alert as if guarding something. Curious, Blake wheeled closer. The dog growled but didn't move. There, lying motionless in the grass, was a young woman. Blake's breath caught in his throat. He wheeled himself closer, his heart racing. Gently, he rolled her over and his world shifted. He recognized her, the waitress from that terrible night. Her name came to him in a rush. Hazel. Blake didn't waste another moment. With great effort, he lifted Hazel into his wheelchair and began the slow, difficult journey back to his house. The dog trotted alongside them, its earlier aggression replaced by concern for its owner. Blake's arms burned with the effort of pushing the... By the time they reached the house, Blake's father had returned and immediately called for an ambulance. As paramedics rushed Hazel to the hospital, Blake realized that this moment had changed everything. Finding Hazel had made him see how precious life was, how important it was to hold on even when things seemed impossible. Over the next few days, Blake visited Hazel at the hospital. He learned that she had collapsed from exhaustion after weeks of studying and stress. As she recovered, Blake apologized for his actions that night at the club and for the pain he had caused her. To his relief, Hazel accepted his apology, acknowledging the change she saw in him. With Hazel's encouragement, Blake decided to pursue physical therapy seriously. It was a long and difficult journey filled with setbacks and triumphs, but Blake kept going. Hazel became a constant source of support, and their tentative friendship blossomed into something more. 6 months later, Blake stood on the cliffs once more, but this time on his own 2 feet, leaning on a cane. As Hazel approached, her face lit up with joy. "You're walking," she exclaimed. Blake smiled, clearly proud of how far he had come. "I wanted to surprise you." As they stood together, watching the sunset, Blake gathered his courage and asked, "Hazel, would you like to go on a real date with me?" Hazel's heart skipped a beat. She smiled, her eyes shining. "Yes, Blake, I'd love to." In that moment, as they held hands and shared their first kiss, both Blake and Hazel knew that this was the beginning of something beautiful, a new chapter in their lives filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of a brighter future.